When I was about 6 or so, my mother bought me my first bike. I was so excited and I hopped on to ride, but of course I fell and it hurt. I tried a few more times, but I kept falling and I kept getting hurt. So after that, the bike just sat there. Finally though, my mom was going on a trip, so she dropped my brother and me off with my grandparents for a week, along with the bike. My grandfather asked me why I hadn't learned to ride it yet, and when I told him it was because I didn't like falling down and hurting myself, he went right out and got me some training wheels, which is why we all need grandparents. With the security of those training wheels to catch me when I tipped too far, I had the courage to hop back on. By the time my mom got back from her trip, the training wheels were off and I was riding like a pro. Now, it's hard to try new things, especially when we're afraid of getting hurt. The hurt can be physical, like falling off of a bike, or it can be the emotional pain of feeling stupid or of having people shame us or make fun of us. When I was taking my daughter on college visits, I remember asking one admissions counselor what set their students apart. She said, "I think people would say about our students that they are really good writers and that they're not afraid to try something, even if they might not be good at it." I was so impressed with both of those things, but the second part in particular, not afraid to try something, even if they might not be good at it. We live in an environment where if you don't get an A, you have failed. So too many kids won't take classes in which they might not excel, even if the subject matter might expand their understanding of the world. It's as though grades are more important than learning. Of course, the problem isn't just internal. There is a reason for our reluctance to put ourselves out there. We live in a culture of shame. People love to point fingers in blame or ridicule, and any mistake we make now can live forever on the internet. There's no room for trial and error. But if there's no room for trial and error, then there's also no room for growth. Think of the learning curve we've been on as a congregation just in the last couple of years. As a new, more light congregation, many of us have had to learn just what all those letters and LGBTQI+ mean, and then get our heads around the concept of using different pronouns. Those are the sorts of things we're bound to mess up on, especially if someone we've always known by one pronoun lets us know that actually their preferred pronouns are different. That takes a while to remember. And it's a sort of thing where we're bound to slip up now and then. If there were no space to ask wrong questions and no forgiveness when we inevitably slip up, then those relationships would simply end. So I can't tell you how proud I have been about the willingness of this congregation to ask those questions and learn, and then to slap on those pronoun buttons so that any person of any gender identity can feel at home here. Well, the same is true with issues of race. At a recent anti-racism training I attended, one of the participants noted, "We have to look at life as a series of learning opportunities rather than failures or mistakes." Amen. Because what would happen if we ridiculed a child every time they made a grammar error, or shamed them for missing a math problem? It would just make them fear school and avoid those subjects. Fear shuts down learning. Ridicule squelches risk-taking. And certainly we've all experienced that. But Jesus offers something that might give us the courage to change that pattern. What he offers is forgiveness. How many times should I forgive a member who hurts me? Peter asks. As many as 7 times? Not 7 times, Jesus answers, but 77 times. Then he tells the parable about the king who forgives his servant a debt so huge that one commentator describes it as exceeding the national debt of a small country. The man in the parable had messed up big time, but he was given the chance to start fresh. We all need that, don't we? Every week we ask God to forgive our debts as we forgive our debtors. Forgiveness. That grace that is extended to us over and over. That forgiveness is the training wheels of spiritual life. It's what allows us to hop back up, dust ourselves off, and try again. So, as we think about this school year, with every student, teacher, and parent being forced onto a huge learning curve of something new and different, how to juggle teaching and learning and parenting in the dangerous world of COVID, having to master new methods of technology and keep track of the different ways this virus can spread, and manage work life and home life, and try to convey or absorb actual subject matter, everyone in this scenario is going to make some mistakes. Everyone's going to get off balance. This is a time to be very, very forgiving with yourself. And this is also a time to be very, very forgiving with one another. Because there's a second part to the parable. Just as there's a second part to that phrase from the Lord's Prayer, forgive us our debts as we forgive our debtors. In the parable, the same man who is forgiven that massive debt goes on to encounter another person who owes him a very small amount. But it's still more than that person can pay right then. Fresh from his own relief of having received the forgiveness he needed, we expect that man to do the same for this person. But no, he has the person thrown into prison. When his master learns what has happened, he rescinds the grace he had extended to the man and has him punished severely. Apparently, that is the one mistake we cannot afford to make. The mistake of failing to extend to others the grace that we ourselves have received. Just as with last week's reading about how to approach one another when we've been hurt, how to listen, and how to stand with one another as witnesses, this passage refers specifically to the kind of community Jesus wants us to have within the church. Peter's question is about how many times to forgive another member when they've wronged us. 70 times 7 is the answer. 7 is the number of completeness. Jesus is telling us to form a community of perfect forgiveness toward one another. What makes it perfect is when it is reciprocal, because that's what gives us the courage to take the risks we need to take if we're going to learn and grow. Like those training wheels. They gave me the courage to keep trying. Yes, when I first started, I would tip too far to one side or too far to the other. I would wobble. I would run off the sidewalk. But the training wheels kept catching me and keeping me from real injury. So I kept on working at it until I got the hang of riding. That's what forgiveness is for. Not to give us permission to stay the same and never get better, but to give us the courage to keep trying. to learn new things, to grow as human beings and as followers of Jesus. Think about what a difference it would make in our relationships and in our world if instead of rejecting or shaming each other whenever we did something wrong, we helped each other to get better. What if we forgave each other and encouraged each other? If instead of catching each other out, we simply caught each other before we fell too far, before we got too hurt. To be a human being is hard. To be a follower of Jesus is even harder. None of us is born knowing how to do either one, but we learn. We learn by trying and failing and trying again. We can do this because God is there to catch us. And we can do this because we are there to catch one another, forgiving as we have been forgiven. Because we have been forgiven, more than we can measure. 70 times 7 doesn't even begin to touch it. So the training wheels that we have been given, we need to pass on, so that this life, which can be so terrifying, can become a joyride, one that we share with others. Together, we can brush off our failures, hop back on, and speed off into the future with the sun in front of us, the wind of the Spirit at our backs, and our friends by our side, all of us cheering one another on as we live and learn and grow. Thanks be to God.